So it's realizing all these social factors and personality factors that play into like the change process. And so when we become vegan, if we want to inspire others, realizing that there is this process, how do we meet the person where they're at? What interests them?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Veganpreneur REVOLUTION Podcast. I'm Vegan Hawkins, your co-host, along with my dear business partner here,
Kathleen Gage.
And we are excited to introduce you to our guest today, Angela Crawford, Dr. Angela Crawford. I love that because I've known Angela for a couple of years now, for going on 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, excuse me, I have seen this amazing woman just blossom. Because when I first met her, she was making the transition from a career that she had had for decades into something that she was passionate about. And the timing was right for her. And what she has done over the past 3 years has been remarkable. I'm excited that we're here helping her to share her story and her wisdom with all of us. And I'm just going to get right into it. Hi, Angela, and welcome to the Veganpreneur REVOLUTION Podcast.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here and to see you both again and, face to face. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It is. Well, Angela, I know one of the things that we like to do is set the stage for everyone and really talk about how being in this vegan space actually started for you. I know that as we talk during this interview, we'll find out more and more about your story, but start us at the beginning. Were you a vegan as a child? Were you, how did you get into this space? And tell us a little bit too about this message of compassion, because that's what I felt from you. That's what I learned from you initially. And I know that you are still in this space, but tell us about your, I guess, origin story here.
Thanks for asking. I grew up in the Midwest and ate the way many Americans eat, this fairly standard American diet. I felt that my mother was a good cook, but it was definitely the meat and potatoes with a little vegetable on the side and cheese sauce on the vegetable. And definitely a chocoholic growing up. I still have that a little bit, but healthier version. But I didn't really think about how my food was produced at that time. I was a compassionate person and I loved animals, but it didn't really connect for me how my food got to me. And so I believe that compassion was what led me to become a psychologist. I cared about people's journeys, and I myself always was trying to transform myself into the best version of who I could be. So I had started as a journalism major. I took a few psychology classes, and that was it. Like midway through my junior year in college, I switched from journalism to psychology, went on to get my PhD, and for 25 years worked as a psychotherapist. It was just last summer that I retired from that work, and it was definitely aligned for me. I got to hear people's stories and help them on their journeys. And yet something was missing, I guess, in my life in different ways. And it was about 17 years ago that I saw a program on PBS that just was like a news feature where they showed workers who were in a meat processing plant. And these workers were immigrants predominantly. They were injured all the time. And their employer was saying, you can't report this or take time off work or you're going to be fired. And so I was working in a pain management program at the time with injured workers. So I think it gave me empathy, like, wow, that just that's terrible, and I thought, I don't want to support this industry. So the very next day I bought my first vegetarian cookbook and started the path first to become vegetarian and then eventually vegan. And I realized pretty quickly, like, well, if I don't like how the workers are treated in this industry, what do I think about what happens to the animals? And that just started me, not only trying out recipes, which is in and of itself a feat because I was not a cook. I just ate what was convenient and comfortable and easy and tasty before. I would eat cheese and crackers for dinner. I didn't cook. But then just learning about that was enough to get me buying cookbooks, trying recipes, finding that, wow, I love this. I loved the different colors and flavors. And then I started reading all the books in my library. This was back in 2006, 2007. So I went to the library, and read all the books I could. And as I learned more, I just became convinced that I needed to first stop eating meat. And that's what I did first. And then I realized that I needed to also stop eating all animal products. That took me longer. That was a little harder for me initially. Just, I think, probably the social aspects of it, how to handle going to gatherings and handle being with family and others. But I don't know. I think as I was growing and working on my own inner work, I realized I had to honor my own truth, even if it was inconvenient or uncomfortable. So I went vegan about 5 years ago. And when I went vegan, I knew it wasn't just about me. I knew it was about bringing my background as a psychologist to help the movement. And that's kind of what's led me to where I am now, working on writing a book and other things to help.
Well, we definitely want to talk about your book. And I want to say this is the first time ever, and I've been vegan now for 6 years. It's the first time ever I've heard somebody say that it was the workers that were the trigger for you. And so glad to hear that, because I know from the research I've done, a lot of times people will say, how can those people work in factory farms? They're as much victims as the animals sometimes. And like you said, many of them might be illegal alien immigrants, which I don't like that term. They're people that are looking for a better life. And unfortunately, they got sucked up into factory farming. But the amount of injury that happens, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, spousal abuse, because it's got to go somewhere. And so thank you for sharing that, because that was the beginning of the domino effect of you becoming 100% vegan, you being able to use your professional background into what you now do within the vegan space. So I have to say that kind of blew me away, because I've never heard anybody share that. And so often you hear people just get angry about the workers instead of saying, let me have empathy and let me try to understand this. So thank you for that.
Compassion. I seriously, how you have an intuitive connection with people. I have to say that everything that I saw surrounding you, your aura, the way that you communicated with people, the things that you had to say, all I felt was compassion. And we were talking about our friend, Dr. Marla Friedman, and I have often talked about how she was the one that introduced me to the concept of ahimsa. And even at the time that we met, I'm totally vegan, but I would not ascribe to being vegan, because what I knew of vegans and who they were, not even so much what they were about, but how I perceived them and how I think the majority of people that are not vegan perceive vegans. It wasn't about compassion. And when she was telling me about ahimsa, and I was able to really connect the dots, I was like, oh, okay, I can talk about the fact that I eat this way, and I have so much compassion for the animals and the people who are working in these factory farms and the planet, because I know what all of this is doing to the planet, I now understand the thread, the golden thread of compassion. And I could turn it towards myself because I kind of felt guilty that I didn't want to call myself a vegan, yet I understood why, and I could have compassion for myself for having that position. And I want to ask you, what do you typically see that makes it hard for people, even vegans saying that they're plant-based, or plant-based people saying that they're not vegan? What's the biggest disconnect that you see that most people have?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, I think when I first became vegetarian, like many people, I was like, why don't people see it, now that I see it. But I've come to really understand, through, for example, Dr. Melanie Joy's work, how we are so conditioned from a very young age that eating meat, animal products is normal and natural and necessary. That's what we're taught. Um, and it's taught from all angles. So I think and then of course many of us have addictions to certain foods that we don't want to give up. And I think between the cultural conditioning, social norms, and our own kind of addiction to certain foods, it's like we have a blind spot. I know, I was 40 when I became vegetarian. Why did I not see it before then? I don't. And I think I was pretty close to it, like you, I kind of had a somewhat negative image sometimes of vegans. And I certainly wondered, what would they eat? I think that's another factor for people. Like sometimes they can't imagine what you would eat on a plant-based diet. And so that we're kind of blocked off. But then what many vegans, of course, discover is like our world actually opens up, that, the choices are more abundant than we ever knew before. And there's a fulfillment because we're truly more aligned with our values, now that we're not eating products of violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because you used the word conditioned, and yes, we are conditioned. We're conditioned to believe certain foods are healthy when they're not. We're conditioned to believe that prescription drugs are going to fix the problem when they don't. We're conditioned, and really in a way we're indoctrinated into a certain lifestyle and belief. And the whole thing around food addiction, that's very real because food manufacturers have scientists that actually blend the foods to get you addicted. They get that what's called the bliss factor or the bliss point, and it's like when it goes in your mouth, it's like a hit of cocaine, and all of a sudden, all the bells and whistles are going off in your brain. So these are very real issues, and I love the question that you asked, Belin, because it really is about how do we shift the perception? How do we raise the awareness? So first of all, Angela, can you tell people how they can find you? I want to make sure that people know where they can find you and your information.
Yeah, my website is www.angelacrawfordphd.com.
Okay.
And that's probably the easiest way to find me because the social media would be also linked on my contact page. And I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn under my name.
Yes, you are. You and I communicate there quite frequently.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay. And now you have your book, The Vegan Transformation. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. I just finally got permission to share it. It's coming out early 2025. It's being edited now and worked on it with the publisher, but it's called The Vegan Transformation, a mind, body, spirit journey to healing yourself and the world. And
Love it.
Yeah, it started from research that I began about 3 years ago. In fact, Kathleen, you were one of the people I interviewed for my research. I was curious about, I knew my own life had transformed since becoming vegan. And I also knew how before becoming vegan, I couldn't imagine, what people ate or how they would live. And then I saw like, wow, my life has opened up. My life, I don't know, I feel fulfilled, aligned. I found a deeper purpose because I feel like by this one change in how I eat and purchase things, I'm affecting so many things I care about. And I found other vegans that I met, there were many that had similar experiences, that either they healed physically from something or they found purpose or fulfillment or peace. And so I wanted to study that because I thought there was quite a bit of research on the health aspects of veganism and quite a bit on the challenges that we face going to a vegan lifestyle, but not as much on how does it benefit us psychologically, when we actually eat and live aligned with our values. So I sent out a survey, and I had about 350 responses from vegans.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I interviewed about 75 of them in depth, and basically was looking at, since becoming vegan, how has your life changed emotionally, spiritually, also physically, but more on the emotional and social and spiritual kind of. And there were 7 core principles that really came through both the interviews and the surveys. And those were like the core chapters of the book. And, I can certainly share about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I ended up using an acronym to help remember them because, 7's quite a bit. So values is the acronym, and that only has 6 letters in it. But values was one of the 7 core transformations. It was like it was the foundation. So I used that word to describe the other 6. But alignment with values, that was the first thing that people would tell me over and over again, is like, I finally feel like I'm really living true to what I believe. A weight has been lifted that I didn't even know was there, because now I'm not eating foods that both harm me physically as well as harm animals and the planet. And so that was the foundational one. And from that, the other 6 are vision, which is like meaning and purpose, having a vision for a better life and a better world, and feeling like you can take action on behalf of that. So that's the V in values. And then A was authentic fulfillment, which was a fulfillment that's not about being happy all the time, but about being true to yourself and fulfilled in a deeper way. You might be happy, but you might have real emotions and ups and downs, but you face those emotions and deal with them in healthy ways. Then there was L, which is love. And that had to do with both finding a like-hearted tribe of people, because think about how we met, and how I've met so many other amazing plant-based vegan people. And the love is also, though, about learning to listen to others and find bridges of connection. How do we connect even if we have differences? The U was unity. So many people that I interviewed said that they now realize they were interconnected with all of life, and that wasn't something I asked. That just kind of came out in a lot of the interviews and surveys with people's open-ended. It was kind of a spiritual thing. But even those that weren't spiritual, they said I now realize I'm connected with nature. So empathy, compassion, expanding that circle of empathy and compassion for all sentient beings. And then the S is self-empowerment over health. And that fits a lot with some of what you were both talking about earlier, realizing that we actually have more control over our health than we've been taught through lifestyle choices and nutrition. So those were the 7 kind of pillars.
I love that. I love that, because it really is about aligning your values to have your vision, your authentic fulfillment, love, unity. I thought it was going to be understanding, and I love unity, because I used to go to Unity Church, and it was all the premise of we are all one. And I think the founders of Unity Church were actually vegan, and which is really cool. And then empathy and self-empowerment, especially over our health. I love that, because I have to stop watching commercials because I get so frustrated at, again, the manipulation and the indoctrination. So I love what you're doing with your message in your book. So, Vilin?
Oh my gosh. The golden thread has just aligned yet again. I love how these 7 core principles just flow so very well. And I think that you've expressed exactly what the realization becomes when people not just align, but they live, they speak, they embody this plant-based vegan lifestyle. And when they do, I mean, how is it that you help people in understanding this? How are you working with people today?
Hmm. Well, professionally, I am still in somewhat of a transition. I retired from my psychotherapy practice last summer, and I spent a lot of this last year really deeply focused on the book and getting it to the publisher. And so a lot of how I help with this right now is through writing, speaking, and creating an online course for people who are transitioning to a vegan lifestyle and coaches who help people who transition to a vegan lifestyle. So through teaching, education, and writing right now are the primary ways that I'm sharing that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I do
One
have a question, and if I may, Vilin,
Okay.
on the book. How long did it take you to write it? When did you first think about writing it? And did it go through any changes and shifts while you were in the middle of writing? And what can you advise to other people who want to write a book? That's a lot of questions that I've asked you, but in essence, tell us about your experience with the book.
Yeah, that was exciting to do. I've had a vision for a book since childhood, but I didn't know what exactly it would look like. Then when I became vegan, I knew I wanted to write about something related to veganism, and I knew I wanted to interview people. Like my background has been in research and journalism and psychology and interviewing people through my work. So I just really love people's stories and how looking at people's experiences and drawing back, core findings from that. So I knew that was the direction I wanted to go. And so I started the research probably 3 years ago, and it took a year and a half or so to do the surveys and the interviews. And this was while I was working full time, and just fitting it in when I could. And then the writing, I would say, I'd started to work on it, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago, but it was slow moving at first. It was just like I would work on it and it just would, but I kept plugging away at it, like I'd have times I couldn't get to it, and then I'd have times I'd work on it. But then the 6 months before I turned it in, I was blessed to be given a time where I could just focus on it pretty much full time. And for that last 6 months, it was a full-time job. I just really, to get it in by the deadline, I just worked on it as much as I could. And so yeah, it really took 2 to 3 years. And part of that was because of the research and then the rest, kind of getting into the groove and having to start and restart at times, but just sticking with it. And then finally just getting into where I could just focus on it, like just as my job.
Nice. I know a lot of people have their writing journey,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much longer than 3 years.
Yeah.
One of our friends, Dr. Sabatino, I've been writing this book for the last 10 years. And finally, it has come to fruition. What would you say is your greatest, I want to say reward, but it's not, it's a personal reward. What's the greatest personal reward you can say because you've gotten this far and the book is happening? What's the greatest reward in all that you've been through? in seeing this book come about?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, it's so, yeah, it's like an expression of everything that matters to me. So it's really neat to see, like, the interviews were so fulfilling and inspiring. In fact, I started a YouTube channel myself based on those interviews, and it's been on hold for a little while, but I'm relaunching it because the interviews themselves, just how people's lives had been transformed, people who healed from physical illness, people who found a career in the plant-based space that expresses their gifts and their passions, people who spiritually felt like their lives had transformed. So meeting the people I met through the interviews and the surveys and sharing their story and the principles that came from those, and in each chapter, not only, do I share the principle and some stories that illustrate it and research that backs it, I also have reflective exercises for the reader to engage in, like the chapter on values, where they can reflect on their own values and how those are expressed in their life. And so I think just that it's such an expression of things that matter to me, that's what's really deeply fulfilling. And my publisher just sent me some book covers to look at. So it's exciting to start to see, like, wow, it's going to be real.
The manifestation. I love it. Well, and Lynn and I, when we work with our clients and let's say somebody is an author and they want to use their book to build their business, that's something that we really help them to strategize. And with your book, if you could wave a magic wand and say, okay, this is what the book has accomplished, besides getting a lot of people to go vegan, what do you hope in your business that this book will do for you and for people who read it?
Yeah. So I'll say first for people that read it and then my business. So for people that read it, I can see it being both for the veg curious that wants a book that's inviting to start to explore, like, how a plant-based lifestyle and moving towards veganism could be a positive. And I think also it can help not only the veg curious, but those who are already vegan just to thrive more, with their vegan lifestyle, because, sometimes people can be plant-based or vegan, but not be fully thriving because maybe they're not including compassion for themselves in that mix. So I'm hoping that it kind of guides people wherever they are on the plant-based spectrum to thrive in mind, body, and spirit. And also, though, it's like a both and, compassion for self and extending that compassion out, because I think we need both. For me personally, I think creating courses and workshops that help share these ideas would be where I'd like to go with this, to be able to help people actually experientially experience some of these ideas, So in my local community, I will probably teach some plant-based cooking courses, but also that include other elements like meditation and things like that to make it a whole mind, body, spirit thing. And then online, it could be, like I mentioned, a colleague and I are creating a vegan transition certification course. So things like that help with the skills. And that course includes not only the practical stuff like nutrition and meal planning, but I covered some of the stuff on, like, the emotional and social aspects of thriving with a vegan or plant-based lifestyle, because that's often where people get tripped up, is how do I handle social situations? So those are some of the things I hope.
Okay. I have a question. You just triggered a thought for me, because I know when I first went vegan, it was just like when I first got sober. It was like everybody needed to be sober, and it's like, no, not everybody does. I was kind of an anomaly in my circle. But anyway, with that being said, when a lot of times when we become vegan, we really get on the bandwagon and we get on a soapbox, and it's like everybody needs to be vegan and think about the animals and think about this. And the reality is not everybody's ready to do it at the time that we do it. I was 64 when I went vegan. And so what are the stages that people go through? I know, like, there's the 5 levels of grieving that people go through. Well, what about the we could say with yours, the values, the 7 levels of becoming a vegan? Like, when you first become vegan, you might try to force it on other people, but then you start just like easing into it, and you live a whole different model of what being vegan is. Because for me today, I want to be an example of what a compassionate vegan is, and a healthy vegan. And so how I approach things today is very differently than I did 6 years ago. So what is your recommendation to people who want to encourage family members? Because I don't live in a 100% vegan household, and I know a lot of vegans who don't, and that can be very frustrating at times. And so we have set ground rules of, like, where if there's going to be meat cooked in the home, it's not going to be in the home, it's going to be on the barbecue, kind of thing. And this is something that I didn't want people to know, because it's like, well, I'm a good vegan, and so my whole household should be vegan. Well, that's not realistic. So how do you approach that, Angela?
Yeah, that's good to ask. So first of all, I think it's remembering that there is a process to change. And, we ourselves had a process before adopting a plant-based and vegan lifestyle. And sometimes I think once we become vegan, we kind of forget that, or
never.
Or there are those that do become vegan overnight and think that everybody else will change overnight as they did.
Right.
But, first of all, realizing there's a stages of change for any lifestyle change, where people go from pre-contemplation to contemplation, where they start to think about it, but are still ambivalent, to something shifting them to preparing and taking action. And then maintenance, we have to have a process to maintain our lifestyle change, because as with any change, whether it's quitting cigarettes or whatever, just taking the action of quitting doesn't mean you're going to maintain it if you don't set up your environment to support you and so it's realizing all those stages first have to happen for someone to even sustain any kind of change, much less a vegan lifestyle where we're still only like 3% of the population. And so you're adopting a lifestyle as a vegan that, you're in the minority and people around you are not. So first, just having compassion that this isn't easy for everybody, even though once you learn all the reasons for it, it seems that it should be, but a lot of people have a hard time being different than the people in their social circle. We're kind of social beings, and some of us are easier at speaking up and just saying, I'm going to be different and I don't care. But there's a lot of people that, even though they might say that on the surface, underneath, they want to fit in. So it's realizing all these social factors and personality factors that play into the change process. And so when we become vegan, if we want to inspire others, realizing that there is this process, how do we meet the person where they're at? What interests them? They might not, I might be vegan for the animals. And, really now that's kind of what keeps me vegan, is I've really made that connection. But someone else, that might not yet be something that speaks to them. So, but maybe they are really concerned about the environment. So maybe I meet them there, or the health. I've certainly had people reach out to me for health reasons, because that's often a driving reason to consider this. So, So meeting them where they're at, and then being a good role model. People change more because of how you made them feel versus always what you said. So if you're inspiring, if you're positive, if you're supportive, that's going to be a lot more inviting to want to join in that movement. And I think last of all, focusing on building bridges of connection. Again, sometimes we get angry that others haven't changed, but if we lash out at people, that's not going to lead to change. We can be direct, we can speak up, but respectfully, just as we would want to be respected. So I think, so that's about inspiring others. But as far as you as a vegan going to social events, speaking up ahead of time, telling the host, I'm vegan, could I bring something? I'm going to bring something, or, if they feel comfortable making it, making sure that they understand what vegan is,
Right. Right.
So you're just being more proactive. I think in the beginning, that's hard for people because we're used to just showing up and not thinking about it. But, we have to be more proactive and speak up. And those are skills that we can learn, and get better at. And that's especially true if you're a whole food plant-based vegan, where like you're also really trying to eat healthy and not just junk food.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because I've gone to gatherings and the host has made something vegan and it's like, it's not the healthiest, but okay. Don't want to hurt the host feeling. But, where I draw the line is if it has any animal products in it whatsoever, animal or dairy, I just will not consume it. So those are great recommendations. So, Bilin?
Oh, my goodness. So you mentioned about the fact that you cook now. And that's been, honestly, in all transparency, that's been a challenge of mine. I am just now after, like Kathleen, I was 64, 65, I don't even remember. Yeah, 64 when I stopped eating meat. And I was the cook in our family. I was the one that made all the meals, or at least made sure that whoever was doing something else, I had all of the rest covered. Everything that I cooked, it was kind of like I had golden hands, right? The Midas touch. Everything was really good. And then all of a sudden, I was cooking for the family and nothing that I made tasted good. It actually tasted awful to them. I wasn't going to eat it. But, we talk about self-sabotage and sabotage, and I have to wonder if my unconscious mind was like, you're not eating this. It's not good. It's not going to be good. And these were some of the dishes that I was like blue ribboned over, right? And that actually led me to the point of saying, guys, I can't do this anymore. You see what's happening here. I can't explain it, but I know I can't do it anymore. And I wanted to say, if I can't eat this food, what does it tell about me that I'm going to fix and feed this poison to you? And I know that that was a pivotal point for me, but I think it was also a point at which I ended up telling myself I was going to have a hard time cooking the good vegan meals that I could then put in front of them to help them transition. So from that point on, I made great stuff for myself. I made enough for myself, and that was it. I wasn't making like a big enough meal to have other people enjoy. Do you find that that is part of the journey? And I'm just getting to one of my favorite things to do now is make mushroom soup. I have this mushroom soup. I've been talking about
the recipe. I want the recipe. I've been asking for it.
And, it's the whole thing of, I get the mushrooms and I do my thing and get the juice of them. And, so there's no measurements to it, thus no recipe quite yet. But is that kind of the journey? You've gone from not cooking to cooking. I want to know how it is that I can step into this cooking part. And I've tried it. I've done HelloFresh and I was like, that's just too much work. And they have all the stuff cut up for you. I've done this thing and I was like, that's too much work. And I don't like how that tastes, so help us to think about, and Kathleen did the same thing and just got into all this great cooking, these beautiful vegan meals. I'm and maybe this is part of it too. How many people are telling themselves, what's wrong with me? That I can't do this, that I'm not there yet. I've been vegan for long enough to be able to. What's holding me back? What's What's the block there? It's time for it to go.
Hey, Doc. Come on, Doc.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it makes me think of how we're all so individual. I had nothing to compare to because I really wasn't much of a cook. Or what I did cook was so repetitive. So this was a whole new, it's like suddenly discovering I could be an artist or something, and create things that were really enjoyable. But I'm aware that we're all different, and maybe for you, like cooking was tied to a certain history that you're having a hard time transitioning it to this new way of being, and how to see it in a fresh way. Because did you enjoy cooking before? I'm trying to get a sense of that.
I did. And it was a lot of the traditional stuff, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed having others to enjoy eating it. I actually think something turned off when I told everyone I could not participate in it anymore. I couldn't cook it. And again, in my mind, it was, I am not going to give you what I know is killing you. And I know it because I'm not doing it myself. But I couldn't connect. How can I help you? Because I've adopted this. And was it because I was scorned at that point in time? And they told me, well, you just eat your stuff and we'll take care of ourselves, as, the rebellious response to what I needed to do for my own survival. And is that common that people go through that?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're describing sort of a history with your family and others who were used to you cooking a certain way and providing food that was like nurturance for them. And I get the sense it took you a while to kind of come to peace with your own decision, and be like, I'm not providing this anymore, which I think it is common, especially maybe for women who are often raised that, we're the ones providing the meal or whatever. So yeah, I don't think you're alone. I think though, like people's journeys are very different depending on their history and their family situation. But maybe now it's like a time for you to discover, what do you want this to be for you? And if you want to share it with those you love, then great. But maybe first finding out what you really want. Do you want to cook? And if so, what kind of cooking is appealing? And
I think the first answer would be, no, not really.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it right there. And yeah.
Because I've all transparency, I have also said, I want a husband who can cook and loves to cook this food. I will do all of the, I'll be the sous chef. I'll be the cleanup crew.
Oh, that's funny. See, and I'll put a twist in that. I cook for my wife. My wife's a park ranger, and it's like we kind of have a rule. It's like, okay, I'll cook, but this is what I'm cooking. And it's so interesting because I can tell if she likes it or not, because, she'll always go, this is good. And it's like, I can tell by the tone of voice, and I can tell by how much she eats on her plate. When she eats the whole thing, it's like, okay, I hit a home run. And I log that away. And because I did not cook before I became vegan, I absolutely refused to cook. That was from some past stuff. And now I love it. And so maybe it is, Belin, that I'm stepping on the doc's toes here, but maybe it is that, you don't need to be cooking. You just, maybe, you're just cooking in life, babe. So there you go. We could do a whole show around the whole psychology of cooking and, why some people really grab onto it when we become vegan, because honestly, I can count probably on one hand in 20 years how many times I cooked. I just wouldn't do it. And now it's like I cook almost every single night. It's like that's my deal, and I love it. So, and then there's people who used to cook a lot and they don't now. So we should do a whole show around that, Dr. Crawford.
Yeah, we could. Okay. No, I agree with what you said, Kathleen. And I'm thinking of, some people I know who aren't vegan even, that they had cooked for their family for so many years and they just reached a burnout point where like, I'm not doing it
Yeah,
I'm not doing it anymore. So
absolutely.
it can happen, I think, even aside from the whole vegan transition piece of it.
Right. So,
Mhm.
well, I cannot believe that our time has really come to an end, and this has just been so delightful, Dr. Crawford. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy
Absolutely.
schedule, and so excited for your new book to come out. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people as they either go along their merry way as a vegan, or they're becoming vegan, or considering it?
Focus on the positives that you'll gain as you go on this journey, whether it's better health or exploring something new that intrigues you. Have a support system, because that's one of the biggest challenges for people with lifestyle changes if you don't have support. So finding other people who are either on the plant-based journey or already vegan to turn to and get advice from or support from. And be patient with yourself through the ups and downs. Don't give up just because something is challenging. Kind of stick with it, kind of work through, why is this part hard for me and how can I find a way around it to keep moving towards, my goal. And kind of
And if
along
it
with all of
takes years.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then have a strong why and keep reconnecting with your why. I'm becoming, and your why will expand as you learn more, because whatever your reasons for becoming plant-based or vegan to start, as you keep reading, you'll see all the other reasons.
Absolutely. So, well, this has been delightful. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm Kathleen Gage, co-host of the Veganpreneur Revolution Podcast show. I'm here with my co-host,
Vegan Hawkins, and I am just so grateful, Dr. Angela, that you were able to come and spend this time with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It was wonderful and such a joyful experience to be with both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And wishing everybody a healthy life, and make the choices that are the most compassionate choices for you, the animals, and the environment.
And you don't have to cook for anybody but you if that's what you want to do.
You've been listening to the Veganpreneur Revolution Podcast show with Vegan Hawkins and Kathleen Gage. Be sure to leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel. And visit our website at veganvisibilityproductions.com. That's veganvisibilityproductions.com. Have a great day and live healthy.